Good morning. Yesterday afternoon, evening, the verdict regarding Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd was publicly given. And I wanted to take a moment this morning to provide to you a video statement written by Paul Gianfrido, who is president and CEO of Mental Health America. So this statement will be read on behalf of both Mental Health America and the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas in response to that verdict. Yesterday's verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin comes with a wave of intense emotions that have been building for the last 11 months. While many will feel relief that justice was served, others may feel frustration at the time that it took to render a verdict when the event was captured in real time nearly a year ago. This past year has tested our nation and torn people apart. Acts of violence have continued, sometimes perpetrated by law enforcement officers, other times by neighbors who have attacked neighbors. The fear and anxiety so many of us feel has been crippling, and we wonder what it will take for justice to become the norm, not just in a single case, but for everyone, everywhere. We see this at MHA in our work, and the unprecedented number of people reporting anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges to us. This number grew steadily and concerningly during the past year, in part because of the stress of these days. All of these emotions, fear, anxiety, worry, depression, are valid responses to what has unfolded over video, on the streets, and in the courtroom since George Floyd's tragic death last May. As we experience some or all of these emotions, we must also recognize two truths. We all feel anxiety and terror at the thought that we could die violently at the hands of someone who is supposed to protect us. But for those whose lives have been marginalized by people in power, often shoulder a mental health burden that is far deeper than what others face. Carlisle Pittman, an organizer for a New Deal for Youth, told the Associated Press this week that it's not normal to see someone get murdered by the click of a video on your phone, yet it has become the norm for our people, our black and brown communities. And Mr. Pittman is absolutely right. When exposed to this violence, and the recent violence has been pouring out of our media in so many parts of our nation, people of color and the people who love them feel a sense of immediacy about the trauma. People of color are forced to think of their own experiences with police or the experiences of their families. This repeated assault on the consciousness is racial trauma, and we at Mental Health America and the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas know that this is a serious threat to our nation's mental health and public health. In addition to this broad racial trauma, we also recognize the profound mental health effects on those who are closest to the trial. Mr. Floyd's family, the witnesses who testified, the jurors who deliberated, and the legal counsel who argued. All involved should be offered long-term, free, accessible mental health supports, and they will certainly need them. The sad reality is that too often these supports are difficult to assess, particularly for people of color. Only 1 in 3 black adults who need mental health care receive it. Among the reasons for this are cost, insurance coverage, geographic inaccessibility, stigma, and the lack of providers of color. Black Americans make up 13% of the U.S. population, yet only 2% of this country's psychiatrists are black. MHA and all of our affiliates around the country are committed to addressing these barriers and to making mental health services equitable and accessible. We must remember that although this may be one step forward, the end of this trial does not mean the end of all our trials. The tragic death of George Floyd opened the eyes of many white Americans to the systemic racism and inequity that black Americans have long experienced. We all cannot simply move on to the next news cycle now. We must give some meaning to this tragedy beyond awareness, beyond hope, beyond prayers for a more equitable and just society. We must commit ourselves to action, to ensuring that all people are treated kindly and with dignity, and that our public policies and practices promote the health and well-being of all our nation's people. We must hold ourselves, and more importantly, our leaders, accountable to the promise of equality and equity for all, of access to the tools of health and well being, and the realization of life and liberty as a fundamental right. Like I said, this has been a statement from Mental Health America. It is reiterated by our office right here in Wichita as we serve the mental health needs of South Central Kansas. We want everyone listening to know just how deeply this tragedy has been felt here in our offices, and we want to do everything we possibly can to serve you. If you need help here in South Central Kansas regarding your mental health, whether it relates to the George Floyd trial or any other issues happening right now in your lives, please call us at 316 652 2590.